Hi everyone, my name is David Rao and I'm the music teacher who blogs at makemomentsmatter.org. You can also find my ideas on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and a variety of other places when you search for my name, David Rao, or Make Moments Matter. One place you won't find me is TikTok because I don't know how to use it. I've not ventured on there because I'm afraid I don't know what I was doing. So you're not going to find me doing any cool TikTok videos yet. Maybe. I just had a birthday over the winter break, so I feel like I'm at the age where I can be like, I'm too old for that now. I don't know. Facebook, I just put in my my microphone, so if you can't hear me, please let me know, and I'll try and fix that. Anyway, I'm so excited to be sharing with y'all this week on the platforms that I can understand about some of my lesson ideas. I'm going to be talking specifically this week about 5th grade and talking about highlighted musician profiles, how I'm integrating that into my lessons, and instrument families. I do that in 5th grade, but that's something that probably you could use in 3rd grade or 4th grade, depending on how you use the material or what your goals are. So a couple quick things before we start. You can find anything that I talk about. If I say like it's on the links page, or I have a link for that, or I can send you whatever. I have a whole page on my blog dedicated to the links and things that I talk about in this video. It's linked on my Instagram link and profile. On Facebook at the bottom of the caption for this video you can find a direct link, or if you go to my blog, which is makemomentsmatter.org, and click the video tab, at the bottom of the list it says Musical Mondays 2020-2021 links recap, and that's all there. So all the links and stuff that I talk about are there if you're interested and you don't know, can't find that link. So a couple cool new resources and opportunities I wanted to share before I got started talking about my lessons that I'm teaching right now. I've just put out a bunch of new things on my Teachers Pay Teacher store if you're interested. I have a whole set of Valentine's games, Valentine's themed, whatever. I have, right now I'm currently in my classroom using like the snow day versions of those games, and Valentine's Day games I just put out. So if you're interested, I put a link on my links page to that. And that's there if you want interactive games, stuff like that. I'm going to be doing a series of workshops for the Alabama Music Educators Association State Conference next week, so next Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So if you're an Alabama music educator and you are not sure whether you want to attend, it's Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday. It's all via Zoom, so we'd love to have you. But I'll be doing 4 sessions, 1 on Thursday night, 1 on Friday night, and 2 on Saturday. So if you're an Alabama music educator, I hope that you'll say hi virtually. I don't know exactly that. You can give me a wave, I don't know, but I hope you'll join us. And then one more thing, next week on January 30th from 9 to 12 Central Time in the morning, I'm going to be doing ukulele workshop for the Northern Plains Kodai chapter. You can find information about that at npkc.weebly.com if you're interested in learning more about ukulele in the elementary music classroom. Okay, so enough talking about other stuff. As I was reflecting on Fall Musical Mondays videos, I realized I just wanted to talk more about the pedagogy and the lessons. So let me tell you a little bit about my specific situation and then dive into my lessons so I can give you more of what I'm doing day to day instead of rushing towards that at the end. So my school, we're currently in a situation where we're teaching in person. I'm seeing all my students in my school every day. It's not hybrid, it's not distance. They're in the building. They are all wearing masks. I'm wearing a mask. I have a hospital grade air filter going at all times. We are not singing. We could probably do some of that if we wanted, again, because of the mask and because of the filter, but the science is out, so we're just not. But the way the rotation works at my school, I see the same homeroom every day for a week, basically for 5 consecutive days, and then I won't see that homeroom again for about 4 or 5 weeks. So it's sort of a weird, I'm sure all you music teachers out there are like, I get it, or I sort of understand. It's sort of a weird situation, but what you need to know is that I see like 1 5th grade homeroom 5 consecutive school days, and then I don't see them for a very long time. And so that sort of changes the way I have to teach and changes the sorts of lessons that I'm sharing with them. I see them for 50 minutes, and then I see them the next day for 50 minutes, and the next, so 5 days in a row for 50 minutes. Whereas normally I would be seeing them like twice a week for 30 minutes. And I would see every class basically every 3 days. That's how the rotation would normally work in a non-COVID year. But this year things are just a little bit different. So that also means that the lessons I started in December, I am still currently teaching. So as you would imagine, as I was planning at like end of November, early December, that like I'm going to start this new rotation of lessons, I'm thinking like, well, I'm not going to do anything holiday themed, because if I teach it in December, then I either have to change my plans for January or continue to teach it, that holiday themed whatever, into January. So I sort of was intentional about not putting a lot of holiday or seasonal themed things into this set of lessons, because I knew that I don't want to reinvent the wheel when I get to January and then feel like I'm like teaching some lessons to some kids and some to not. So I just sort of went with like what's next in the pacing guide instead of like what's a December thing, if that makes sense. So it's a little tricky, but I'm going to keep teaching these lessons also through the end of January. So because of days off and whatever, it makes the schedule sort of odd. It's also tricky because then kids I haven't seen since the beginning of December, I will not see until basically the beginning of February. It's weird. Anyway, so that's why I wanted to share, instead of like giving you a rundown of all my lessons and just really briefly hitting everything, I'm just going to do a sort of an in-depth and show you all 5 days of my 5th grade lessons, because I think that you, no matter whether you're thinking like, oh, I could do this for 5th grade, or you wanted to pull it for maybe a different grade, you could probably pull the content and do it with a 4th grade or 3rd grade, or maybe even 2nd grade, depending on how you adapt it and how you change it. But I wanted to share sort of some of the process and how I get to that with my kiddos. So I'm just going to do sort of a rundown starting in lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, lesson 4, lesson 5, and give you sort of the breakdown of how I do each thing, and then point out specific things sort of along the way. So this is all 5th grade, what I'm currently teaching in 5th grade, even though the material is malleable depending on what you do with it. So one of the things that I've gotten really comfortable with and really enjoyed is that I do a PowerPoint for every lesson I teach. And I remember back when I first started teaching, like I knew teachers who had smart boards and they had these like, I don't know what they called them, but it was like everything was on a slide and they would like just click through as they were going. And I remember being like, wow, that's so organized, and I wouldn't know how to, and I never had a smart board, so I never did that. But I'm doing it now, and there are a couple of reasons for that. I found that it's so nice, like as kids are walking in, I just have like a welcome screen. So like you can see as they walk in, it says welcome to music, and then there's like the little Bitmoji of me wearing my cold weather gear. Right? So like there's something up there for them to see as they walk in. I have a little clicker with me at all times, but I'm finding that it cuts down on me walking over to my computer, so that if I don't have a chance to sanitize my hands, or if I'm at the other side of the room, I don't have to go touch my computer. I don't have to do any of that. So if there's ever a time where I need like an MP3 or something, I can put that in the PowerPoint. I actually use Keynote because I have a Mac, so I can put that in the Keynote. I can put any images I want in the Keynote. It's nice because it means that like sort of my lesson plan is digitized, right? So then like I click like, what's next? I mean, like I know what's next. I've taught these lessons, like this is my 3rd time through the rotation or whatever, but like I know it's coming next. But I can put it on the slide. I can put little reminders on the slide. Anything digital I can add into the slide, but it just cuts down on me going back and forth to my computer, which is it's a huge time saver. And also, again, like you're not having cross-contamination of like, oh, I didn't wash my hands and I don't want to touch my keyboard, or I don't want to go over by my coffee mug because I haven't cleaned my hands or whatever. So I've been just putting everything into these keynotes, and it's been really, really helpful. It also keeps me on track as we go, which is great. So as kids walk in, they see this sort of welcome to music screen, and my joke shtick with my 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders in every class is, man, do you know what's such a great way to start the day? Body percussion. And so every time they come in, we do body percussion, and it makes it easy for me to be like, well, the first thing I say is, what's a great way to start the day? And they're like, ugh, by the end of the 5 days, they're like, body percussion. But like it's fun. But anyway, so it's my little joke for them. how do we start body percussion? So maybe the first day, it's I do it and they echo, or they're actually used to that. This is like our third rotation through, so they're used to like me just standing and clapping or patting, whatever. In the last set of lessons, we got to the point where we were reading. We were reading on the body percussion staff, and I'll show you that in just a second. Renee said, how do you play a video within a slide with the clicker? If you put a video on the slide and just hit next, it will automatically start the video. At least in Keynote. I think it's an option in PowerPoint. I know it's an option in PowerPoint. But if you click, like you can do, I think in PowerPoint, I think it's under the animations pane. You can click like, the trigger is like you click next and it will start the video. But I know that you can embed videos into the PowerPoint if you want. I know a lot of people do that on like Google Slides and whatever, but I don't trust that my internet's going to work. So I do it in Keynote. Anyway, so they come in and we're now reading on the staff. So this is just a simplified 4-line staff, and they come in and they, my rule for that is, like what I always say for our process is, read it first, then perform it. Read it first, then perform it. Read it first, then perform it. So we always read through. So for this we would do like ta, ta, ta-dee, ta, then ta, ta, ta-dee, ta. And I always try and reinforce that like 2 times through, first we read, then we do. And like they're so good at this point that we could just do it. But I like having in there that like it reinforces like the reading and then also the layer on to the next step. Because I know there are some kids who, even though we've had a lot of practice with it, couldn't just perform it the first time. They really do need the 2 times through. They need the process. They need to be able to have a foundation, right? So we read first and then we do. And that's especially good when we get to more complex things. So it builds up. It starts with really simple rhythms. Just simple, like just maybe 2 levels, just maybe patting and clapping, and then we expand pat, clap, snap, or we just keep going and going and going, and making it more difficult through this first lesson. So by the time we're done, and let's see, I have 10 slides, and so by the time we're done, maybe do like a ta on each level, stomp, pat, clap, snap, and I try and be really conscious of like how the rhythms I use, not to make it too complex so that they feel pretty confident, because it's the first day. So we just sort of do pretty simple things. I can show. I know this is backwards. I'm sorry, because it's the FaceTime camera. But I can fix that actually on. I can fix that on Facebook, but I can't fix it on Instagram. I'm so sorry, Instagram. Okay, so hopefully now this is not backwards for Facebook. Yeah, okay, so it's just really, really simple rhythms, right? It's nothing too complex, and this is just the first day, right? So it's sort of a review, sort of something easy they can do as a fun little body percussion. Let me just I saw some questions in here. Your graphics are great. Do you create them? I don't create the clip art. I make all the slides and stuff, but I don't make any of the clip art. But I do find that. There's somebody else who asked, where'd you get your clicker? It's a really cheap clicker from Amazon, and I have it linked on my Amazon page under like technology for music class or something. It's not expensive. It was maybe $13, and I've dropped it probably 1,000 times. And it still works great. But no, the clicker, I'll put that on the links page. The clicker I have now, I love because it has a volume button. It's been a game changer. Is the clip art free? No, sorry. I buy a lot of clip art because I use it in my TPT store, and then I also use it in my classroom. So, okay. So we start the day with body percussion. Every lesson, that's what we start with. It's a great way to start the day, is body percussion. So they know that coming in. They're expecting it, and they're very good at it by the end of the 5 days. And then I've started doing, and I keep looking over here because I keep looking at my PowerPoint that I've made, because it really is such a lifesaver. So then the next thing we do is that for each of my lessons, I'm started doing this year a musician profile, and I call it a musician spotlight. And basically, I want just to expand my students' worldview. I want them to know about more musicians, about different kinds of musicians. I want them to. There are so many different cool things you can embed along the way, and I hope you see that in this course of this 5 lessons, like the different things we can get to and talk about. But we. Spending just 5-10 minutes talking about a different musician or composer or performer, it has been such a cool experience and eye-opening for me and my kids. And I'll just say it really doesn't take that long, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. And because I have 50-minute blocks, I feel totally fine doing that. But anyway, so let me show you and talk a little about what I do. So we talk about musician profile and like what a spotlight is, why we're doing this, and then I show them the first person. The first person we talk about in this set of lessons is Dizzy Gillespie. And there's a reason for my madness you'll find out in a minute. But I made this bulletin board set years ago. And there's like a set for every month where there are 30 musician profiles of people who are born in January, and then 30 musician profiles of musicians born in February, and then born in March, and then born in April. And I made this like years ago as a bulletin board set, and I actually have them out in the hallway right now. I printed off a couple. So like Dolly Parton, and there's just a little quick bio about her life, her name, the day she was born. Here's one for Tito Puente. This would be from his April set, but it's just a little bit. So what I did then for when I start the musician profile is I start with this picture. Because all the people who I talk about in my musician profiles, I actually have in the bulletin board set. And so the reason I start with this picture, a couple reasons. One, it already has a lot of information there, right? And it's eye-catching, and it has like the musician's picture, right? So it's just like a good visual to start with. But also, I'm going to be putting these up in the hallway this year, so I want them to see it on our slide, and then once they see it out in the hallway, they're like, ooh, I recognize all the same, it's all the same format. I recognize that. I can go and find that person and talk about it again, or if it's another person from the same month who wasn't a profile, because there are 30 musicians that are up on the wall right now who were born in January, and I'm only talking about 5 of them this week. Not even January people, just 5 musicians. So I want kids to see this image and then go and associate it with what's in the hallway so that they make that connection, be like, ooh, I want to learn more about other musicians or whatever. At least that's my hope. And I've been told, some of the teachers who are standing out there as they're picking up or taking their kids or dropping off kids, they're like, ooh, the kids have been talking about the musicians. I'm like, yes, it's working. Anyway, so the musicians that are, when I do my musician profiles, I always start with that image that's pulled from that bulletin board set. And I have a set. It's easy now. It's 360 different musicians because it's 30 people for every month of the year. So I have a pre-made bulletin board that I can just print out and use, but also then I can reuse that image in this PowerPoint. So it's a really quick little bio for Dizzy Gillespie. It says, Dizzy Gillespie was a jazz trumpeter, band leader, composer, and singer. Some would say that Dizzy was the best trumpeter, best jazz trumpeter of all time, and he's definitely one of the most iconic. Known for his bent trumpet, puffed cheeks, and genuine personality, Dizzy was responsible doing what Sorry, I can't read. I'm getting old, so I can't see anymore. Dizzy was responsible, along with Charlie Parker, for the development of the bebop style. So he's not actually born in January, he's born in October, but I pulled him out on purpose because, well, you'll see in a minute. And so anyway, so I pulled him out on purpose. We talk about what makes him special, and then on the next page we just talk about, the year he was born, the year he died. I have another picture of him. Dizzy Gillespie is a great example of why you should have photos of these musicians, because the kids immediately are like, whoa! They see the photo of him and they're like, oh my gosh. And he is absolutely iconic, and part of the thing is that they're like, he looks so weird. And I was like, yeah, but if you see him on stage, you immediately know who he is. Number 1, there's this crazy bent trumpet. Number 2, his cheeks are huge. And you're not going to mistake anybody else for him. So look, we talk a little bit about how that distinctive quality makes him unique and how it made him stand out. And that he wanted that. And we pull... I can, if we have time, I always pull out the book, Dizzy. If you've never read this book, it's a fun little book by Jonah Winter. Yeah, Jonah Winter, illustrated by Sean Qualls. And it talks in here about how people called him Dizzy as like a dig, like it was a derogatory thing. And he was like, I like that. Dizzy, cool. It's way more interesting. Isn't his real name John? Yeah, John Gillespie. Well, Dizzy is way more iconic. So he took these things that were unique about him and he capitalized on it. And so we talked throughout the PowerPoint, we talked about how he developed this brand new style, this bebop style along with Charlie Parker. We talk about how he dropped his trumpet or bumped his trumpet. Something happened to his trumpet at a party and it bent and he liked it. And so then he had a custom trumpet made to be that sort of fantastical trumpet. So we talk about how he's known for playing the trumpet. I always have a special word for that musician. So the word for Dizzy Gillespie is virtuoso. And we talk about that's a person who's highly skilled and with special or great knowledge about an instrument. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to move it so y'all can see it. So again, it's just a picture of Dizzy Gillespie talking a little bit. We talk about what a virtuoso is. We talk, and I don't necessarily care if they remember that specific vocabulary word, but I want them to know that if you are especially skilled at an instrument, or you're especially good at it, that is a big deal. It's not just oh, he's pretty good. No, he was really, really amazing, and he helped develop something totally new. And so then I found a video online of Dizzy Gillespie playing. He's actually sort of the band leader in this one. So he plays, and then other people play, and then he plays. So it lets them actually see him at work. And one of the things we do talk about when Dizzy comes up is I say, is this video, is it in color or black and white? And they're like, black and white. I was like, do you think that was black and white on purpose? Did they take a color video and make it black and white? And then, that discussion starts happening ooh, pictures used to just only be in black and white. And I say, oh, great. So that helps us place when this happened. Wait, and so we have a picture and a video, but it's not paintings. We actually do have a picture. So it's not really, really old, but it's not probably from yesterday. We talk about, we use our context clues to help understand where in time this falls. And these are just little things that in the course of 15 seconds you can embed into a little conversation about the artist, and it gives so much more context, but it also helps bring in those critical thinking skills of placing it in time and space, or giving context, or asking a clarifying question. So instead of just saying this is the time it happened, you could say well, because it's older, it just gives a little bit more to the conversation. So we end with that, and I say, great, any questions? And if they have questions, I do my best to field them. I'm not a Dizzy Gillespie expert, but I try and field them as best I can, and then we move on. And if there are questions that I don't know, I say, I don't know. And if I feel it's an easy one, what was Dizzy's wife's name? I'm I don't know, let me ask Google. I can Google quick, but if they're what was a distinctive blah, if they ask a very specific question, I'll be that's a great question that I will look up for tomorrow. And so if it's something that's easy, I'll tackle it then. But if not, I'll just wait and say oh, you want a video of Dizzy and Charlie Parker? I'll see if that exists, and I'll see if I can bring it tomorrow. But I always sort of round out the end of this conversation with a quick any questions? Great, and then we move on. And so then from there, our lesson sort of transitions to instrument families. And my fifth graders, we've been talking about instrument families already this year. So I think I take more time with it than maybe other teachers do. And which is fine, I think that maybe I take longer with it, because when I learned instrument families as an elementary school kid, I remember it was here's the French horn, it's brass. Here's a violin, it's strings. Here's a clarinet, it's woodwinds. Just remember that. And I was really bad at remembering that, because there were some that I just couldn't remember where they went, or I couldn't remember why is this woodwinds and not brass? What, I don't know, it's metal, isn't that brass? And I hated that in high school and in college, especially becoming a music major. it just wasn't inherent as to like why things were the way they were. And I want, again, part of me spending more time on this is infusing those critical thinking skills into the lesson and making this less of like it's rote memorization and more about like, let's use our context clues to identify. So it's that infusing critical thinking, but also I want to really have kids have a good understanding. I want them to know why things are categorized the way they are. And I want them to have, just a bigger understanding of the instruments too. It's not just like, oh, brass, trumpet, French horn, trombone, let's move on. You know, it's like we talk about a lot more than just that. And you'll see some of that in these lessons here. So I made, with that in mind, I made a bundle of resources like 5 years ago. So, it says 2016 on the thing because it's in my TPT store. So I'm like, what's the copyright? 2016. But the bundle of resources has tons in it, and for each of the 4 families I have kids look for 5 clues to help them identify what family does this instrument belong to, and you'll see those in just a second, those 5 different clues. But it also has all the visuals, all the videos, all the links, everything all pulled into one place, and some worksheets and some games and stuff all into the one bundle, which is great. Now 5 years later I'm like, ooh, I'm just gonna pull from that work I did back then. But what we've done already is that my students have already interacted with strings and percussion, and so they sort of know what's coming because they've already had these lessons and conversations about a different instrument family. So today we're talking about the brass family. And so we start with, so again, there's just a visual, and it starts, brass family, and then we go through and we talk about the different clues to help you identify what makes a brass family. And for each and every clue, there are pictures, there are links, there's always stuff to like give more efficacy to that information. So when we're going through clues to make something brass, the first one is it has to have a mouthpiece. And I say that, woodwinds and brass, but both of those families have mouthpieces because they're called wind instruments, because you put your wind, your breath into that instrument. And so there has to be a place that your mouth can touch the instrument. It's the piece that touches your mouth. That's why it's called the mouthpiece. Oh my gosh, how wonderful is that? It's so easy to remember because it's the piece that touches your mouth. Oh my gosh. But you know what? You're never going to find a mouthpiece on a string instrument. You just aren't, because you don't need your breath, right? And so having that quick conversation about like, are you going to find a mouthpiece on a percussion instrument? No, but it's like, fun. But also it's having them realize like, fundamentally, these 2 families, woodwinds and brass, are this way because you put your breath into them, right? So we talk about that. Why does it have a mouthpiece? I actually show them. Well, there are pictures on here, but I show them my French horn mouthpiece, and I say, these mouthpieces in the brass instruments are all different sizes, but they are always the same shape. Like they are always this cone shape. It always has a circle on the end, and it goes on the outside of your mouth. It never goes in your mouth. Brass instruments, the mouthpiece stays on the outside of your mouth, and it's always this conical shape. And I make a big deal about that. And that one of the reasons I do brass before woodwinds is because if you set like the standard of here are the rules for brass, you could say like here's how woodwinds is different. But if you start with woodwinds, it's harder to contrast, I think. Personally, I think. So I start with brass. So we talk about the mouthpiece. I show a mouthpiece, and then we go on. So the mouthpiece goes onto the tubing. And so you put the mouthpiece onto the tube, and it helps make the sound. And I play the mouthpiece on its own. I play the mouthpiece in the instrument and show them the difference. But I say it's not just, that's how it makes the bigger sound. That's how the sound is developed. But more than that, the tubes are a great clue to help you know it's a brass instrument. If you see coiled tubing, if you see lots and lots of tubes in lots of fun little weird macaroni shapes, like different coils, that's brass. Woodwinds don't do that. Strings and percussion, they don't do that. If you see an instrument that has those metal coiled tubes all over, it's most likely brass. It's a good clue that it's brass. But the first clue is it has a mouthpiece. The second clue is it has the tubing. And then I show pictures of different examples of that. The third clue is it has to have a flared bell, and I show them again a picture of that too. And I say, so at the end of the instrument, it sort of opens up sort of a flower shape. But more than that, more important than it just having the flared bell, is that is the only place air can leave the instrument. You put air in through the mouthpiece, it goes through all the tubes, it can't escape anywhere except through the bell. So if you hooked a hose up to the mouthpiece and put water through it, the only place water is going to come out is the bell. It's airtight otherwise. Or if you plugged up the end, it couldn't come out. So like that was a distinction I don't think I ever learned as a kid, that like, and now I think like, woodwinds, there are holes all over the bore of the instrument. Like that's just like something that makes it special. But the brass instrument, when you say like it has a flared bell and that bell is the only place where air can escape, it helps sort of give more information, more context. And so I show them that on the picture. I also have my French horn and I show them that as we go. And I talk about the bell. It doesn't matter where the bell is. So a French horn can, the bell can point back. The tuba, the bell can point up. Trumpet, the bell can point out. That doesn't matter. But what does matter is that there is a flared bell and it's the only place air can escape the instrument. And again, I have pictures of all of that. So like, there's a French horn, there's a tuba, there's a trumpet. And this is all in that same PowerPoint to sort of give them that context. Which is nice because then I can walk around and, point at it with my little laser pointer or whatever as we go. Clue number 4, the brass instruments are made of metal. And I say they are always, always, always made out of metal. Except if they aren't, because there are a couple, we'll get to that, but mostly they are made of metal. And can you guess what kind of metal they're made out of? And one kid's like, brass? I'm like, yes, that's why it's called a brass instrument, because it's made out of brass. Sometimes if you look at them, you're like, ooh, it's gold, it's made out of gold. But if you had a French horn made out of pure gold, don't you think that would get stolen all the time? And again, this is a silly thing to talk about, like maybe something that they would infer on their own. But to talk with them about the instrument, how like it's made out of brass and you can have it plated in different colors. And it can, like that gives them more context and more understanding, and you're helping develop their critical thinking skills as you go through, instead of just like, yeah, in the French horn, it's gold. That gold is brass, but it's not actually gold. Okay, moving on. Like if you have the conversation about like, what? Yeah, different colors, but is it really gold or is it really silver? Having that gives more context and gives them a lot more understanding. And they feel ownership of the content when they have those little clues. So I say it's always, always, always made out of brass, always made out of metal. Except if it's not, because there are a couple times when it's not. We talk a little bit about like plexiglass or plastic and how you might use those. Like in marching band, we talk about why that would be important. If you have a huge sousaphone, it'd be way lighter if it's plexiglass. Or if you're outside in marching band, you don't want the metal to get rained on or whatever. So, it's nice to have plastic, or, it's a little cheaper. We talk a little bit about that just so that they have the context of like, it's always metal, it's always metal, it's always metal. Wait, there's this thing. It's this trumpet. What's this plastic trumpet? Is it still a trumpet? It's plastic. So giving them that context of like, always metal, except sometimes not. And I always say, like, if you went to the Kansas City Symphony, you're not going to find a plastic trumpet on stage. You just won't. But you might find it in marching band. Like in our marching band, you might see it. Or you might see it in a store. But if you go to like a really fancy concert, you're not going to see the plastic or the fiberglass, most likely. But giving them that context of like, here's the rule, and here's like maybe the one little exception. It helps them out. Especially when you get to woodwinds, there's another example of that. And then we talk about valves, and I say that, we talk about how it works, and I actually pull out my French horn, and I talk about how, the air only goes through certain tubes, but if you press down this valve, it's like it opens a door in here, and air can pass now through this tube. And now it can't because I let go, and now it can't, and we talk about the combination of the valves and how the valves work. Another distinction that I always mention is, the other thing that's so easy to spot on brass instruments is that yes, it can have 3 or 4 or 5 pistons or valves or rotors or whatever you want to call them. It can have 3 or 4 or maybe 5. But almost in every single instrument, only one hand is going to play those valves. The other hand just holds. It's lazy. So you got a trumpet, one hand does all the playing, the other hand just holds. Doing euphonium, one hand plays and the other one just sits there, right? So it's easy to spot. Woodwinds, those woodwinds, they're always working. Both hands working, both hands working, both hands work. They're always, it's too much work. But you know what? You play a trumpet, this hand's just holding, right? So like, again, it's like a little distinction, like really the importance is on the valves, but it helps them identify from far away. Oh, one hand is just holding the instrument, probably it's brass, like most likely. And so it's another little distinction that helps them along the way. Every brass instrument has valves, except if it doesn't. because there's that instrument, the trombone, that has the long slide, and we talk about that exception. And then sometimes I'll talk about a bugle, because sometimes those don't have valves, or old-timey French horns. That don't, like, you can give some of those exceptions, but I always say, like, they always have 3, 4, or 5. No more than that, right? Except if sometimes they do, like the trombone. And then I even say, like, some trombones actually have valves when I show them a picture of, like, one of those two. And then we go through the clues, and I have a little quiz here at the end where, like, we look at an instrument and we go through the clues. Does it have a mouthpiece? Does it have coiled tubes? Does it have valve? Does it have a flared bell? Is it made out of metal? If you can answer yes to several of those things, probably it's a brass instrument. My favorite is to throw this up at them. Let's go through the clues. Does it have a mouthpiece? Yes, but is it the same shape that it should be? Is that cone shaped? No. Okay, that's probably bad. Does it have coiled tubes? Like a couple, like here and here, but like for the most part, it's like one straight long piece. So like, that's not good. But okay, sort of. Does it have a flared bell? Yeah, kind of. Yeah, but that's not the only place air can escape. There are lots of other places along the bore of the instrument where air can escape. So like, that's not good. Okay. It's not really, like, it's sort of hitting our clues, but like not really so far. Is that made out of metal? Yes. Because that's what kids always say. Like, look at saxophone, the first thing it says, it's metal, it's brass. But when you go through the clues and you're like, but, okay, do you see 3 or 4 valves? No, but I see lots and lots of holes along the side of the instrument where your fingers could go and play. Okay, so is it brass or not? And they're like, oh no, it's not brass. So I love using the saxophone as an example because the saxophone is the instrument that trips up so many kids. And so this is a great chance to sort of dispel that, like, it's not just, you can't just look at what the metal is made out of. And then for fun, at the end, I have this video where somebody took a GoPro and they, I don't know, why is it not starting? They took a GoPro and they stuck it on the end of a trombone and then they played Star Wars. So I think it's fun because you actually do see the slides going in and out. You can see, we talk about the flared bell for sure, and the mouthpiece and why, how this works. So that's sort of just a fun video. If we get to it at the end, great. Oh, and one little thing, it's good to have little examples like that. I mean, as many examples as you can, but always to have examples of different kinds of instruments. I have one instrument in my classroom. I have a French horn because I had this growing up. I played in high school. I played, like, I step away and I play just a little bit to, like, give them some sounds. In previous non-COVID years, I would play, like, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star or, like, a scale or something, and it does not sound good because I've not played since high school. But I do have it there, and I show them, and we point out all the little clues that we've learned along the way, right, of how this works and how that instrument is brass. And it's great to have that example. So day 2 is another brass day. They come in. Great way to start the day, because guess what? Body percussion. So we do body percussion, a little bit more complex examples. This day, our musician of the day is our musician spotlight. I'm sort of rushing through so I can get to the brass family part. Our musician of the day is Janelle Monáe. I chose Janelle for a couple reasons. I wanted them to see, I'm always shooting for diversity. I'm always talking specifically about different types and genres. I'm trying to give them more exposure to different things. Janelle Monáe is still living. She's still very current. They know her from a couple different things. Her music has been in some things that maybe they've heard of before. I can't play a ton of her music because it's not super school appropriate, but she did a special song for Rio 2. Like, she did the like featured song for that. She's been in a couple things where, like, award shows and stuff that you might consider showing to kids. And she was in the movie Hidden Figures. She was an actress in that. So we talk a little bit about that. But what's most exciting for my kids is she was born in Kansas City, Kansas, and we live in essentially Kansas City, Kansas. And I can talk about how she just grew up 20 miles away. She's only in her 30s. So, sometimes we talk about, like, Dizzy Gillespie, who lived a long time ago on this, other coast. Or this other person who lived, they live in England. Or this other person in Austria or whatever. This other person, they lived in California. She was born and grew up here. She was in the coterie, the children's theater in Kansas City, and like things that they've been on field trips to, like they can make that connection. So you may not choose to do Janelle Monáe because she, may not be as impactful for you and your students, but trying to find somebody who's like in your area. Like, did Leanne Rimes grow up in your little neck of the woods? Like that is super impactful. So that's one of the reasons I talked about Janelle Monáe. The other cool thing I can pull from Janelle Monáe is not only is she a great musician and rapper and singer and actress, she's also a record producer. So that's our highlighted word of the day. We talk about what a record producer does and why that's important. And the cool thing is that the video that I found from Rio 2, it's like shot as if they're in a recording studio. So we can talk about what that means to be a record producer and like what that would look like, and we can actually talk and like ski into the studio, which is super cool. And then on the second day, instead of like going and jumping to woodwinds, I have a whole day where like we meet the brass family. So another part of that PowerPoint set, that resource set that I have here, I'll just make it big. Is like meet the instruments, and of course I have a French horn there because I played French horn. So, what up? Shout out. Okay, so then there's a page for common instruments, and then I go through it. On each one, I have the picture. Okay, the picture. I have a couple of videos I could pull from if I wanted to, and then I have a little blurb. I do not read the blurbs. And I'll say this for the other PowerPoint too. I do not read them verbatim. Like, I don't read the whole thing down. I summarize because I know my kids, if they're going to sit and listen to me read every single page, I would get bored. I wrote it and I would get bored. But the reason I put that narrative there is if you wanted to put it online for online learning, you could. If you wanted to read from the slide, you could. If you wanted to just use it as a reference page, you could. You could actually print these pages out and like bind them in a book and have it like be like an instrument encyclopedia for your kids or whatever if you wanted. The links wouldn't work, but I mean you could still do that. So on this trumpet page, it gives them a little bit about like the range it plays, the notes, why they're high. Trumpets used to be used to send signals in battle or hunting, and they've been used as musical instruments since the 15th century. So like little tidbits of information, and I do that for a variety of different instruments. So this specific one, we're talking about brass, we have trumpet, cornet, we compare and contrast those obviously, because they're very similar but not. French horn, trombone, baritone, euphonium. Again, are they the same? No, they're not. Who knows? Okay, but then we talk about why they are different, and we can go from page to page. And then tuba. And then I have pulled out specific videos that I want to share with them. So I have like an exemplar video of a trumpet player, like a classical trumpet player, because we saw Dizzy Gillespie the other day playing jazz trumpet. So like we can get a little bit of a spectrum there. I show them a video of the Canadian brass. There's a really cool video of the Canadian brass playing Flight of the Bumblebee. And so then there's like a trumpet, a piccolo trumpet, a French horn, a trombone, and a tuba. So that's a lot they're getting in just that one video that I can point out. And I don't like press play and step away. That's not how I'm the kind of person who's like, ooh, and do you notice? Okay, look, you can see his fingers. See, three valves. See what I told you? 3 valves on that. Like, oh, the trombone, look, does it have valves? And like as we're watching, I let them watch for like maybe total 15 seconds uninterrupted, and then I'm posing a question or pointing out something for them to look at. Or, it's not just like I'm not checking my email, right? Like I'm actively like, ooh, and watch this part, and so that's for that reason I choose videos that I like to watch and also that are rich with information. So the Canadian brass, and then there's a video on the silly video that shows sort of different sizes of trombones and all different sizes. And then a video of a brass quartet euphonium quartet that plays Super Mario Brothers. So almost all these videos are linked on this resource. You could go in and find tons of things on YouTube, but for each page here, if you don't want to do the work, and jump on, because it takes forever. But if you want to look, like there's always like usually like a solo of that instrument or an exemplar video, and then maybe something a little bit more fun. So like for a lot of the instruments, I'll have like a meet the instrument where there's like a soloist from such and such an orchestra giving a quick intro, and then the second video is like, and now watch this person play Harry Potter theme or whatever on their instrument. So it gives you some sort of contrasting videos if you want to pull and use them in your lessons. You could even just take like one, instead of doing a musician profile, you could do an instrument profile and like say like, oh, today's euphonium day, and like do a, you know, like the breakdown I do for my musician of the day, just do that with the instrument. There's so much in that resource if you wanted. Day 3, what's a great way to start the day? Body percussion. So we do that again. This day we've worked in 16th notes. It's a little bit more complex. Again, about 10 examples, but that's it. And then we move on. Laura, yep, the instrument resources is on TPT, and it's on my links page if you're interested in seeing a little more. Today is the day where we move to woodwinds. So my musician of the day is Charlie Parker. And so we talk about Charlie Parker, we talk about bebop, we talk about improvising on the saxophone. But again, why is Charlie Parker so impactful for my students? He was born in Kansas City, Kansas, and he grew up 20 miles from where my students live. And so again, I mean, I would use Charlie Parker even if I didn't live here, but like especially impactful for my students because he was born and grew up here. So we talk about Charlie Parker. Oh, and this, I'll say, I do use the resource from my own TPT store, right, the bulletin board, but because I already have this basic profile. But then Sarah Bybee has these amazing like Composer of the Month, Musician of the Month packs. Ooh, it's so visually pleasing. She doesn't have one for Janelle Monáe or Dizzy Gillespie, I look. But she does have one for Charlie Parker and my other musicians of the week. So I bring in, it's like, it saves me so much time and effort. So she has pictures, she has definitions, she has fact sheets. It's amazing. It's worth every penny. And so it has spotlight definitions, and the definitions she's pulled out are bebop and interpolation, which is perfect. And she actually uses the term spotlight. Oh my gosh, fits my theme. Thank you, Sarah. She's so good. And then there's a video of Dizzy Gillespie playing with Charlie Parker, and they play. It's a quick, short little video online. So then that musician profile doesn't take very long. It's pretty quick. So then we jump into woodwinds, and we do the same basic process of what I did with the brass family for how to identify what makes it special. And so the clues, I'll just zoom through this because I know if you wanted, you could pull the resource you want or make your own version of it. But again, clue number 1, and because we've made that foundation of all the things in brass, it's easy to contrast this with brass. And the first clue is a great example. Mouthpiece. It has to have a mouthpiece because you use your mouth, you use your wind, put your wind into the instrument, right? It makes it a wind instrument. But the mouthpiece is so different because the brass instrument, they're always the same. It's always going to be a cone shape. Whether it's huge or little, it doesn't matter. It's always the shape. The mouthpiece always goes outside of your mouth. Your lips go onto the mouthpiece, but the mouthpiece never enters your mouth. Woodwinds, sometimes you put your lips on top of the mouthpiece. Sometimes the mouthpiece goes into your mouth. Sometimes the mouthpiece is just a piece of wood. They're all different. Sometimes they're pointy, sometimes they're not. They're all different, but your mouth does go on them. So that's why I do brass first, because then I can say, so if you see someone's mouth going onto an instrument and it's not the same shape as a brass instrument mouthpiece, that might be a clue that it's a woodwind instrument. And so it's easy to contrast that with what we've learned before. I show them different mouthpieces. So in the PowerPoint, you can see a piccolo, you can see a saxophone, you can see an oboe. So they can see that they're very different versions of the mouthpiece. And then we go on. Clue number 2 is a reed. Not all woodwind instruments have reeds, but woodwind instruments are the only instruments that can have reeds, right? So like it's like a square is a rectangle, but not all rectangles are squares. I said that to my 5th graders and they were like, what? And I was like, a hamburger is a sandwich, but not all sandwiches are hamburgers. And they were like, what? So I was like, just get it. Anyway, no wonder. So anyway, oh, David, no, sorry. Oh yeah, Sarah Bybee, she's on Teachers Pay Teachers. SaraBibee. And I think it's Music with Sarah Bybee, I think, is what you can find it on Teachers Pay Teachers. So the reeds thing, we talk about reeds. I say not all woodwind instruments have reeds, but some do. So if you see an instrument with a reed, it's automatically not brass, because brass never have reeds. And if you see an instrument with a reed, well, it's for sure not going to be percussion or strings because they don't even have mouthpieces. So you know if it has a reed, it has to be woodwinds. And we talk about single reed, double reed. I show them that. I actually have a clarinet that I pull out, and so I show them. I show them an actual reed, what that looks like. We talk about what they're for and how they work, and then I show them some woodwind instruments without reeds, like the recorder, like the one that we use in class, or the flute, or the pan flute. We talk about those and give a little bit of contrast. Then we talk about the shape. Oh right, the tubes. The brass instruments have tubes, all those coils and spins and whatever. Woodwind instruments are almost always one long straight tube. I mean, regardless of what it is, even though like this one, I show them this one, the saxophone, even though there are like some turns at the end, right? Like some little turns here. For the most part, it's just one long straight tube, and that's it. And so giving that contrast of like, flute, one long straight tube, clarinet, one long straight tube, bassoon, one long straight tube, but like trumpet, coil, 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 coil. Tuba, coil, 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 coil. Like that is something that immediately from far away across the stage, they can see it and be like, it looks like woodwind. To give them that information about shape. We talk about the keys and the holes and how you can have keys on top because in some instruments you cover the holes with your fingers, but sometimes the holes are so far away that you couldn't make your whole hand stretch to fit. So that's why they have those special keys and holes and things. And I pull that out and show them that on the clarinet. And it's also a time to talk about there are holes in the bore of the instrument when you can compare that to a brass instrument where the only place air can escape is the bell. And so this is another way to do that. And then clue number 5, it can be made out of anything. It can be made out of metal, made out of wood, made out of plastic, made out of resin, made out of glass. It can be made out of anything. It doesn't matter. Anything. And so my video for the day is I show them there is a TED Talk where a man in Australia makes a clarinet out of a carrot. And the kids are like, what? And it is so funny to see them react to that. But yeah, so those are my clues. The mouthpiece and how it's different from brass. Might have a reed. The shape, the tubular shape, could be made out of any material, and keys and holes. And then we look at more examples of that, right? We talk about that and look at different examples. Is 5th grade the first year you teach instrument families? Yes. Like explicitly. We talk maybe a little bit about it in other times, and I usually separate my teams are the instrument families, percussion, strings, woodwind, brass. But like I really hit it in 5th grade, partially because and I might be shifting it to 4th grade, partially because at my old school they would start band the following year, so it was like a great prelude. In COVID, it's all bets are off. We actually don't have beginning band at my school this year. They usually start in 5th grade, so it makes sense to shift it to 4th grade so that in the following year they'll be all jazzed about joining a band. But I start in 5th grade. And then we have a little quiz and we do our thing. So day 4 is, again, body percussion. And then a musician profile. This day it's Lin-Manuel Miranda. And again, so a super contrast from Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and Janelle Monáe, super different. We could talk about musicals. We can talk about how he's an actor. We can talk about how he's, again, a producer or a lyricist. We can talk about what a lyricist is and how they're involved with lyrics and not just the music. And so that's super cool. And there's a video you can find online that gives like a quick 7-minute breakdown of Lin-Manuel Miranda's life. And so many of them know him because of Hamilton, but a lot of kids don't. So, it's another great way to get another diverse musician in front of them and to get them to sort of recognize like, oh yeah, wow, what an amazing career he's already had and he's so young. So he's my musician of the day. We do our woodwinds where this is, the day where we do sort of like a meet the instrument family and we look through each one and we then watch a couple videos about it. There are a bunch of videos in that resource pack where they can play around. Then I have a game where all my kids have iPads, which I know is crazy and a blessing. So I am super, super thankful. But I wanted to share with you this game that I have them play. Basically, they start with a QR code. They can use that to get to it from their iPad. But so here's the game, and they get to look at the instrument and classify where it belongs. So, I've taught them all the clues. They should be able to find, if they don't know it by rote, if they don't know, like, well, obviously a sousaphone, that's brass, then they can go through their clues and get to what the answer is. So hopefully they can figure it out. And if they tap it, they get to move on to the next challenge. Let me show you what happens, though, if they don't get it right. So if they don't get it right, they sort of can't fail. So like if they hit percussion instead, they get like a oops, right? But then if they get the right answer, then they can move on. So this is great because it gives them a challenge and it lets them try out their knowledge. And this is a fun interactive game. It would work for Google whatever online thing, Google Classroom. It'd work for Seesaw and for Canvas. It embeds as a URL, but you can also play it on things like Chromebooks and iPads and stuff. And it's just a super simple game. I have it themed for Valentine's Day too if you want that, but this is just a non-theme, just whatever time of year. And they can quickly go through. There are always the kids who are like just the tap, 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 like wrong, 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 wrong. I don't care as long until I get it right. There are those kids, and so I walk them behind them. I'm like, oh, you got a couple wrong. Let's look at the clues. So like I try and zero in and help them focus on that specific thing to help them really look at the clues and not just like try and zoom through the lesson, because then they're not really getting it. So we spent a little bit of time, and if they get through that game, most of them don't. But if they get through that game, I have a backup QR code for another instrument game that I created that they've already played sort of before, but I have them just sort of, because I give it a new theme, they're like, oh, it's the snowball fight one, or it's the Christmas one, or the what. They don't really care. They'll play it, and they're fine with that. But this Four Corners game is what I'm calling this. The Four Corners game is really great because then they really do have to sort of classify and look and understand. And even if they aren't processing through and taking all the time that I want them to, they're still seeing a sousaphone, and they're seeing a bugle, and they're seeing a bassoon, and they're seeing, like they're getting exposure to it. And I am working my darndest to walk around and make sure that they're actually processing through the way I want. But even if they don't, they're still getting really good practice, and they're seeing a lot of different instruments. By the time they get done with this, they see, I can't remember, I think 40 or 45 different instruments. No, more than that. Maybe 50. I can't remember how many are in the game, how many levels, but quite a few, and they get to do that. Okay, day 5. I'm out of time, so I'm not gonna rush through day 5. I'll hit it next week, and we'll talk a little bit more about it because it's a really fun lesson. I don't want to just like slam through. And I am gonna be doing a live video. I know it's MLK Day next Monday, but I am gonna still have a live video. So because we teach that week, so if you want more lesson ideas, you want more help, I'm gonna be doing this again next Monday night. But I'll just start by saying that my musician of the day is John Williams. So, ooh, where are we gonna go with that? It's exciting. But anyway, I hope this gave you some ideas about instrument families. Like I said at the beginning of the video, if you weren't here for that, you can take this content and reuse it for multiple grades if you want. It's how you frame the content. The musician profile concept could be for any grade, even down to K. You'd probably spend more time watching and less time talking, but you can reuse it in different ways. The instrument families you can use for different grades. If that's, if your curriculum says you do it in second or whatever, you could probably reframe it and use it a different way. But because I spend so much time with like critical thinking and focus on categorizing and thinking about it, I think it works a little bit better for older grades. Laura, you said, how do you get them signed in with the code? So with iPads, they just scan it with their camera. It's a QR code, and it just takes them immediately to a website. If you have the URL, like if you get the product and you have like the web address, they just click the link and it goes there. They don't have to sign in. It just takes them and they can start. Hope that answers your question. Okay, so next week I'm going to be finishing up with my 5th grade lesson number 5. Sorry I went really in depth, but I wanted to talk about the process and sort of how I do that. And Laura, I do not have any printed off. I put the QR code up in my PowerPoint and they can just scan and go. But next week I'm going to start with 5th grade, lesson 5, and then highlight another grade. I hope you'll join me next Monday night, but if you can't, I always take these videos and archive them on YouTube and on Facebook, and I put them on my podcast, so you can always get back to those if you want. So thanks so much, everyone, for spending the night with me. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.